is it worth us just, I'd be really interested to know from you guys how you're dealing with the challenges around COVID, given that a lot of what we're all trying to do, it suddenly becomes quite constrained. And maybe that's just a good thing to talk around.
Yeah, definitely. Before I go on to that, now I can see a question from Anna. Let me just read out the question. Can you see the questions, or do I need to read it out? And have you seen differences in how China audience receive your work compared to UK audience? What do you measure and how? Okay, that's a very good question. Maybe we could. Oh, these questions are from the audience. Why couldn't I see it? I guess they can only be sent to us by Anna. That is absolutely fine. So, okay, this is a great question. Maybe we could start with this question. How have you experienced in China audience receive your work compared to UK audience? I'll say a bit on that, and then I'll pass back to John and William. I do think the Chinese audience receive, well, we're all habitual animals. We have our established taste, and really depends on which region you are, urban or rural, middle class, or migrant workers. You do consume very differently. Within our context, I guess we're very much targeting at the fast rising middle class and consumers, in particular the internationally educated urban audience, and very much focus on educating their next generation, their own children. So with that in mind, I would say the difference in cultural consumption is small. In terms of how they can pick up technology really quickly and consume anything that is on the market. However, there is the content difference, which the Chinese audience, especially the elite and educated class, they have been educated through very much Confucius background. So they have a very strong Chinese sense of identity inbred in their mind. And so with that, when they consume content, perhaps there is certain similarities and yet slight difference. That's my view. What do you think, John? And perhaps then go to William.
Sure, Hailey. So in terms of where our particular project is, we have yet to go into the market and test it with audiences. But what we know at the minute is that the age profile of the audiences is slightly different between the UK and China. So there is, in both countries, there's a strong sort of family audience, but the tailing off of interest in galleries that you sometimes see amongst teenagers and people in their early 20s in the UK doesn't happen so much in China. In fact, it kind of is pretty strong. So there's that difference that we're sort of dealing with. But also, one of the things that we find is quite interesting is that there is clearly a demand in China for British art. And the evidence we have for that is the fact that the Tate had one of their their single most attended exhibition ever was Turner's Landscapes in Shanghai. So 600,000 people went to that. And there is a strong tradition of landscape painting in China, a very different approach to the UK. But it shows, I think, that with the right content, you can attract an audience in China.
What do you think, William? Sorry, William, you're muted.
In terms of measuring the audience's level of engagement, surveys probably is about the best we've found so far. I guess before we started showing the mutator work in China, I knew there would be lots of synergy because we're using lots of randomness. The imagery is very organic. And the imagery in some ways influenced by, going way back, by Chinese painted screens. And so China had its influence on the mutator art right from the start. So I kind of knew it probably would be a good fit culturally. I guess we're learning as we go. And the more exhibitions we do, the more we learn what the audience is enjoying.
Yeah, I would echo that as well, and in particular with the last question from the audience, in terms of measurements and engagement of different audiences, rural versus urban, middle class, and etc. What I would add to what I have consistently emphasized are the Chinese government is very much, what China until very, very recently still is a rural agricultural based country, developing country. But in the last couple of years, I think 2016 was the first time it jumped to the second largest economy globally. So with that, I think we have to bear in mind the majority of what we have seen is a small percentage, although with the base of the population, the percentage is big in comparison of middle class and urban consumers. They are digital savvy, internationally aware. And those people are usually speaking educated in Western cultural environment. They're very familiar with Tate Museum, art gallery. They used to consider that as a social status as well as cultural capital forms. But I think the Chinese government, certainly since Xi Jinping, has put repeated emphasis on cultural export, produce and tell our own stories with confidence and balance rural-urban economy and rural-urban audience percentage. So I think in that context, it's difficult and yet not too difficult to track the audience base, because all the art institutions do have the obligation in order to obtain the funding to perform in universities, schools, as well as urban cities, but predominantly rural countryside. We call it to bring performance to the countryside. So you can track the audience in that way. Certain contemporary like drama center, their audience is very much urban-based, middle class and white collar. So in that sense, it's easy to target if you have a particular audience in your mind. So I just wonder, we have another question, which is great. And it says, what do you need to consider with transnational audience research? And that's a very good question. William, if I could direct this to you first, please.
So what was the question again?
What do you need to consider with transnational audience research? Transnational audience research.
Right, gosh. I guess I don't do that much research on the audience.
Don't worry. Maybe I could.
We just produce the assets. I guess the themes that we're dealing with, like in a VR experience, it's like being inside a giant orchid, which is changing shape around you, and your body movements influence the shape of that orchid. And so it's like really kind of primeval, very pure experience, which hopefully you can enjoy, hopefully, whatever cultural background you're coming from. So that's why I've always avoided narrative, and I've always avoided try and get to some really big universal themes. And UK art world's never particularly liked my work, but the Chinese audience really does seem to like the work. So definitely, in terms of the audience, I'm getting a lot of interest in China, and we just see where it goes.
Yeah, no, that's I think from your research background, what we can see is a natural link, neuroscience, what people desire, and consumers, commonalities. I will share my experience and my research and experience and our project. And before I ask John to share yours, from our research perspectives, it is very much about from day one. It's about transnational audience. It started in Shanghai, started in rural, urban, and started with the concept of migrant culture. working class migrant culture, and how the post-industrial transition from made in China to created in China very much at the beginning of the 21st century, 2001, 2002. Has really changed the audience base in rural urban. I'm talking about migrant culture, the Shanghai Opera, for example, was sponsored, developed by China first female working class and textile factory workers. When they moved from Zhejiang province to Shanghai, the only option they had back in the 1920s, 1940s was either to work in textile factory or to sing opera for their fellow female workers. And that's how the opera form, Yueju, boomed along with the textile industry. And of course, under Mao's era, the textile industry further developed into a national kind of power, and then only to be met, very similar to Margaret Thatcher's era, the decline of industry era, the forced transformation from industry to post-industry. So millions, we're talking about 550,000 textile female workers were made redundant in late 1990s. And that has a huge impact on the art form transformation as well as the consumer transformation. So it's very similar kind of pattern we can see from UK and China, from industry to post-industry, from how theatre moved from the theatre stage to site-specific, to digital technology, trying to engage new audience. So in that sense, I think there are similarities we can find between UK and Chinese audience, and something that really hit the core of the class issue, migrant issue, and cultural belonging identity. So that's our project, where I'm coming from. What's your view, John, before we move on to the next question?
I mean, I think like William, it's not really my great area of expertise. And to be honest, in terms of, there's obviously loads of audience research taking place within the project. I think our general sense is that we are looking to engage a fairly broad family audience across the project, but there are some very smart people doing this work, and I'm not really best placed to summarize that, I'm afraid.
Very modest.
Sorry, Johnny Freeman's work in this area is definitely worth looking at.
Yeah. But Factory 42 is such an important work, and certainly for my work, and I referenced Factory 42 as well as others. To me, the participatory audience development is quite a new thing. So you have a lot to share in that aspect, and how to engage audience through technology, through content, and how do you think that experience might be transferred in China? I'm still really interested in that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. I mean, I think So in terms of engaging audiences, I mean, being very clear about who you're trying to target, what they like doing, what they want to do, and then trying to extrapolate that out into the sorts of things you might make is obviously fundamental. I think how you reach that audience to let them know that your event or experience is happening is absolutely crucial. And there are, through digital media and social media, a lot of very really good ways you can be very, very targeted. They don't have to be particularly high cost. I think the old model of just sticking posters up on the underground in London or other sort of adverts is, the world's moved on a long way since then. I think using sort of narrative driven content in attracting audiences is important, and also the likes of Team Lab have shown, so Team Lab, the big kind of projection mapping driven experience in Shanghai and Tokyo that's had huge audience numbers. They've shown, sometimes a bit controversially, the power of users themselves posting Instagram photos of their experiences, and how that own user generated content effectively acts as your own marketing, so it does the work for you. Some people obviously say, that it's designed purely for Instagram, and maybe that there is a question mark around its artistic validity. But I think as someone who's a big believer in giving access to all audiences and all forms of art. And having done the Shanghai Team Ladder experience, I think what they do is amazing. So I think it's about, trying new things in new ways. It's about being innovative.
Yeah. On that topic now, really, well, I want to further ask now the concept of children, engagement. We all of us touched on, including Professor Liu, about the emphasis in China is because of the one-child policy, and also pastorizing middle class and the family. Child engagement is far more important sometimes even than the younger middle class. Certainly, Alice in Wonderland, that immersive theatre performance, hit record high in Shanghai. So with that in mind, is that a new field for you both, to engage young audience to participate in theatre and digital technology, or is something transferable easily?
I think so. Just cutting in. Interestingly, like in the UK, a lot of most households will, have games consoles, which is not the case in China. So when I'm making a VR experience, show it in the art gallery context, but at the back of my mind, I'm thinking this is good enough. It could be pushed out through games publishing channels, something that people might use at night. So there isn't that secondary larger market of people who have games consoles who may have a VR headset to go with their PlayStation or an Oculus Rift. So in Europe, one can see there's this secondary opportunity. If something's a real hit, you can push it out into the games publishing channel through Steam or whatever, Viveport. But I haven't got a sight yet of with China being so mobile focused, what that console VR opportunity is. Maybe it will grow over time. But so in terms of reaching that child audience that play consoles, I can't see how that's going to happen in the home context. It's still going to be in your mainstream gallery context that people are going to be experiencing it. And then you're looking at ticket sales and commissions to put on exhibitions, but you're not going to hit the jackpot, in the same way that you do with a big games release, in Europe.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was talking to my colleague, partner, as well as friend at Shanghai Opera House last week about gaming children, trying to introduce Dubbit as one of our partners to China. And what they have suggested is there's a huge market of learning English, but Chinese content dubbed English, learning process and lessons, and that apparently will be hugely popular in the Chinese gaming sphere. So on that note, what do you think? Could I just ask John first and then William about how to merge Chinese content with new technology and really seek new opportunity for UK-China collaboration on gaming digital technology?
Oh golly, big question. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's not really a focus of what we're doing. We know that what we do know. So our focus is around connected museums, and so what we also know is that one of the purposes of museums is for people to be able to understand the past, the future, humanity, and engaging them through interactive technologies and learning through play is important. And so that is where I think there's a really interesting opportunity. On our current Audiences the Future project, which is a collaboration between a number of different UK cultural organisations, including the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum, the Almeida Theatre. One of the ways that we have responded to the global pandemic is having been forced to sort of move away from putting on shared visitor experiences to move to a purely digital in-home model. We've done that through creating fun learning apps for children. And so we've used the themes of dinosaurs and robots, which is the theme of the overarching product, and aimed at younger people, kids, to see if we can engage them and let them understand and learn about paleontology or basic scientific principles or robotics. And those things have worked very well through sort of gaming and play. I'd be fascinated just knowing that, our panel is about creating shared experiences, and yet right now it's not possible to do shared experiences that well. I'd love to know how you guys are responding to the challenges of COVID, because certainly as a producer of these events, that is our number one and almost our only priority right now. It's how do you deliver these experiences to people with all the restrictions that we're living within.
So very quickly, so we're able to log on to PCs in China remotely from the UK in terms of installing the software. So we're doing it all, like we were there twice last year with one of the exhibitions, but we're delivering it all remotely, and being able to log on to a PC in China from the UK via TeamViewer or equivalent. It's letting us get a lot. But your projects are probably more complex than ours, John.
Challenge is so there's the making bit, which is challenging across time zones and not being able to meet your co-production partners in person, which we're managing through Zoom and things like that. And then there is the physical activation of the experiences. So how do you, in the UK, at least until today, the tape's been closed for the last 4 to 6 weeks, and prior to that for several months. And so it's how do you plan and deliver experiences when quite often access to collections is, it's just not, you can't get there basically. And it does throw open an opportunity for digital technology. So, we pivoted very, very quickly on our project on dinosaurs and robots. We were 2 months away from opening 2 big museum scale activations. So there were going to be ticketed experiences inside museums, groups of strangers were going to gather, put on headsets. It was all a great idea and it will come back. But in COVID, it's not possible. And so we had to think about how can we engage audiences at home. So we pivoted very, very quickly to deliver those internet.
Yeah, John, that really is great. We have 2 minutes left, and we have one long question, but I think it's a really good question. If we could just share this question amongst us and before we finish in 2 minutes time. It says, I'll read it out. How, when we create new immersive experiences, do we build into the narrative design and multicultural audience niche needs so we don't risk alienating people? Should we do it for a main audience and then build versions for global audiences, or is it possible to create one experience that suits all?
So I'm happy to do that. We're still working it out, I think is fair to say, but I think it is quite rare to be able to create any form of content or experience that pleases everybody on the planet just in one single version. And often when you do that, I used to work in television, and there was a long history of sort of trans-European co-productions around TV drama. And generally the outcome was pretty bad, and they were known as Euro puddings because they were basically things that had lots of different people saying it's got to be like this, it's got to be like that. Everything became compromised, and the outcome was something that really served no one. And so I think probably versioning things for different markets is the way to go, but I think it depends on what it is you're trying to deliver, how you're trying to deliver, and taking it from there.
William, very quickly.
Very, very quickly, I think things can be collaborated to death, and everyone believes in collaboration, and then at the end of it, it's so bland, no one has any idea what it was they were doing in the first place. So I personally think getting the product right, like we've shown a lot of work in Russia, for example, we refined it there, and then we've shown it in other countries. So I think you get if it's strong enough, the main offering, you can do slightly different versions for different territories, but it should carry itself. That's my personal opinion.
Both William and John, definitely. But let's continue to collaborate and hope we'll build something brilliant that will appeal to the majority of the audience across UK and China. Thank you so much, William and John. And that is now the end of our question and answer panel. Thank you very much. And thank you, Anne, for sharing the screen and questions with us.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.